Second half of our unit is on the Protestant Reformation. So we're going to start with the first video in this series on Martin Luther and the Reformation. We'll get into how the Reformation goes and changes the Catholic Church in England, and then see how the Reformation continues and the effects of the Reformation that we're still dealing with today. Questions we want to think about when we're working our way through this unit is what were people like Martin Luther protesting, protesting? What are they protesting against? And then what are some of the reforms proposed by Luther to counteract the things in the Catholic Church that they're protesting to begin with? The Protestant Reformation simply is going to be a split of the Holy Catholic Church. It's going to be fueled by humanism and the study of the classics, where again, out of classical Greece and Rome, we get the emphasis on the value of the individual and the idea of having your own individual faith, not relying on what a priest, a bishop, a cardinal, a pope is going to tell you, and also the printing press. Without the printing press and spreading the ideas of Luther, you wouldn't get the impact and the change that we see in Europe without this new piece of technology. And so some people come along and their ideas are great and wonderful, but no one hears them. So instead of becoming just a footnote or a subset of German history, Martin Luther becomes a household name because of this new piece of technology. And then finally, it's fueled by skeptical Christians. People are ripe for change leading into this movement. We saw already with the issues of the Catholic Church, with the social, political, economic, and religious changes brought up by the Black Death. And so there is a willing audience to listen to people like Luther and become more susceptible to their ideas that they're espousing. So some of the causes of the Reformation include social, political, economic, and religious. So in terms of social causes, humanism and secularism led to people questioning the church. Again, we just talked about this, the idea that there is a body of people who are already looking at the church and saying, hey, they could be doing things better. The printing press is then going to be able to help spread these ideas critical of the church so more and more people can learn about them. Politically, powerful monarchs are challenging the church as the supreme power in Europe. The Pope and the kings and queens of Europe are butting heads, trying to figure out who has the actual power in an individual kingdom. Is it the king? Is it the Catholic Church? Is it the Pope of Rome? We already saw this a little bit in the Middle Ages with things like the investiture conflict. Leaders are viewing the Pope as we move into this time period as a foreign ruler and someone outside their country who doesn't know what's best for the people, who knows what's best, the king does. So they begin to challenge the Pope's authority. In terms of economic, the princes and kings start to become jealous of the church's wealth. And so as these kings start to look and need money, say like England or France for 100 Years' War or War of the Roses or this or the church becomes an easy target to prey upon, saying, well, we want a piece of this action. And merchants and others resented having to pay taxes or tithes to the church in order to be able to get services from them. Religiously, some church leaders had become worldly and corrupt, which some people were taking exception to, and many people found church practices such as the sale of indulgences unacceptable. And we'll get into that a little bit more in depth as we're going through this. So this is really setting the stage for what's going on here. We've already talked about some early calls for reform, going all the way back till the end of the last semester, with people like John Wycliffe and Jan Hus, who denied the power of the Pope, denied Pope had any right to worldly power, taught that the Bible had more authority than church leaders did. So we've already seen some people be able to get their information out there to challenge the church, but again, as we saw, both Wycliffe and Hus are going to be condemned and burned at the stake for their beliefs. As we begin to see with the rise of Christian humanist criticism in the 1500s, with Erasmus, who's arguing for a Christianity of the heart and not one of correct dogma or practice, and Thomas More trying to create a perfect world as a model to work our way towards, this criticism began to uh, it kind of changed the way people are looking at the church in the time period. And obviously, the printing press now starts to come in as we move into the 1500s, which allows many Europeans to not only read more religious works, but importantly, read those religious works themselves in their own language, coming up with their own interpretations to help inform their own opinions about the church, which is going to allow people like Martin Luther to come right in and take this willingness for change and run with it with some success. Martin Luther himself is just a monk and a teacher. He taught scripture at the University of Wittenberg in the German state of Saxony. I mean, again, we could spend all second semester just on Martin Luther himself. He's a pretty famous guy, pretty well studied. Martin Luther's dad wanted him to be a lawyer. And the story goes that as Martin Luther was coming home from his university where he's studying at law, got trapped on his horse in a very bad thunderstorm. Uh, Branches are breaking off in front of him. There's lightning striking to the left and the right, and he gets down off his knee, gets down off his horse onto his knees, puts his hand together and prays to God. God, if you deliver me from this terrible, horrible storm, I'll go and I'll quit becoming a lawyer and I'll go join the clergy. And the storm passes, and Martin Luther, true to his word, goes and joins the Catholic Church. Now he's monking and teaching. He's learning. He's reading the Bible. The big thing, the event that sets all the Reformation in motion, occurs in 1517. And what Martin Luther is angered about, and you're going to need to know that for your quiz, is he's angered over the actions of the friar Johann Tetzel. What's Johann Tetzel doing? Well, Tetzel's trying to raise money for St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome by selling indulgences. So work backwards a little bit. What's Martin Luther upset about? What's this final straw that breaks the camel's back? Is the church selling indulgences. Now, again, this is the same St. Peter's with the dome that's inspired by, that it's designed by Michelangelo. This is the biggest, largest church in Christendom. This is in Rome for the Pope. So you're going to need a lot of money, not just from the Romans, not just from the Italians, but all over Europe. So the friar Johann Tetzel is one of an army of fundraisers sent out throughout Europe to raise money for St. Peter's. Tetzel is raising money through the selling of indulgences. An indulgence is a pardon that released a sinner from performing the penalty that a priest imposed on them for their sin and or sins. Mr. Cranmer stubs his toe, he yells out a swear word, you're not supposed to swear. I go to my parish priest, he says, yeah, say 50 Hail Marys, and then I can do that. Well, 50 Hail Marys is too much to get me out of that sin. I could buy an indulgence, right? And that indulgence was a small amount of money, right, to be able to release me from that particular sin. And today, back then, most people are okay with this idea that you can spend a small amount of money to release you out of the penalty for a small sin. And so that's kind of the what's being put out there, what the impression is. However, small amounts of money aren't going to build the largest church in Christendom fast or quickly or efficiently. So Johann Tetzel specifically is going out and giving the impression that if you buy an indulgence, you can buy your way into heaven. So he is taking this idea of indulgences, but he's got to raise money for the church. So he's thinking of ways, how can I get more money in there by selling these indulgences as a get out of jail free card. So this is the idea that you want to be able to go and not only get yourself into heaven, but think about grandma. Think about your little newborn baby that passed away. Think about your darling child that got whooping cough and died. And so people start to realize that, oh, hey, I can go see these people in the afterlife. I don't have to do time in purgatory. I don't have to do all this other stuff because I can buy my way into heaven. These are significant in terms of how much they cost. It's something crazy, or again, it's hard to be able to put in, well, Mr. Kramer, how much is it in today? It's upwards of a 10% of what a peasant family would make in a year would go and buy you one of these indulgences. Now, you might say that might be a worthwhile investment. It's going to get you into heaven. But Luther and other people are saying that these peasants are living week to week, day to day, month to month. So like they need all the cash they have on hand, and this little sip of paper is might affect them in the long run, but in their afterlife, but it's not going to improve their day-to-day life, and it's going to make it actually worth. And you kind of get this impression of Johann Tetzel as this sleazy used car salesman type of guy. He even has his own little slogan that when a coin in the coffin rings, a soul from purgatory springs. So this is the kind of stuff that is the final straw that Luther is upset about. So that's the painting by Martin Luther. That's by a couple of famous painters. This is a big deal. My wife's parents, so my in-laws, are very active in their Lutheran church. So on the mantle at their house, they have the Playmobil Martin Luther that was released in 2017 on the 500th year anniversary of Martin Luther starting his kind of pushback against the Catholic Church there. So two Martin Luthers there, one a painting relatively contemporary and one Playmobil Martin Luther. Now Martin Luther is upset over guys like Johann Tetzel, and as you can see here, it says his name, Johann Tetzel. What is he selling? He's selling indulgences. Going from town to town, going and selling these to anybody that will do that. This is the actual chest that the Vatican has that Johann Tetzel himself was using to go sell the indulgences to be able to pay for St. Peter's. This is, if not one of them, all right, and again, you can kind of read that in German, all right, to be able to go and do that. But again, it's signed by Johann Tetzel right down there to go and do this. It's got the cross keys of St. Peter and the Vatican, the symbol of the Pope. So, these indulgences are kind of be seen in two different ways. We're going to see a couple of different engravings here. On one hand, we got people like this, so anybody going and buying these indulgences can go be in there and be like a David, be in front of God and buy your way into heaven. So this is a very much saying, yes, indulgence is good. This is great. However, some people, as we see in this one, not that great. Indulgences are bad. So this kind of cartoon criticizing indulgences, we see the devil here, right, who's got one of his claws in a bucket of holy water, right? He's using a indulgence as a to wipe his butt, right? Because that's the saying what it's good for. He's got fools with a false sense of security hanging out in the serpent's mouth, where all he can do is just snap his mouth shut and get him. And again, he's saying, "Hey, anybody want to go buy one of these?" Right, with the arm stretched out. So this is very anti-indulgence, what we have in there. So Martin Luther upset about this, and the kind of culmination of his upset is he sits down and he writes. And on October 31st of 1517, Luther responds to not just the indulgence being sold by Johann Tetzel, but other things that have been kind of gnawing at him and worrying about the Catholic Church by writing his 95 theses. These are 95 formal statements on the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg. The idea being that Luther is upset. Here are 95 things that are upsetting him about the Catholic Church. Again, sometimes you just need to vent. This is how Martin Luther is venting. So he goes, and again, if this is a movie, it's a TV show about Martin Luther, this is when the music swells and you hear the boom, boom, boom of the hammer being nailing it on there. And why is he doing this? Because again, this is the bulletin board for the Catholic Church. There's no Facebook Marketplace. There's no this. You want something to go get out there. This is where you're going to do it. Now, in theory, Luther is going to writing these by hand. He's going there. He's walking away. He's happy. He's made his point. Well, this is where, again, small things begin to have large consequences thanks to technology. The technology that's available now is the printing press. So someone takes these 95 theses, writes them down, and then more importantly, prints them out in hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of copies, and they spread throughout Europe. So within weeks, no longer is it just one guy writing 95 things that maybe Wittenberg gets into a discussion about, but spontaneous debate erupts out of Germany across Europe. And Luther quickly becomes not just a footnote in history, but a household name throughout Europe. And these actions are going to begin the movement called the Reformation, a movement for religious reform. Reformation, reform, Reformation, reform. So, key point here, understand, is Luther calling for the end of the Catholic Church? The answer is no. He's saying here are 95 things that I have issues with, 95 things we need to correct, 95 problems. And so if we can do that, then I will be appeased and the Catholic Church will be, quote, better, end quote, in the view of Martin Luther. So again, couple paintings just to go and show this big idea here. I think this is from a movie or a TV show that I know Mr. Gurr used to like to show. I think that's one of the Fiends is. But again, you got Martin Luther. He's nailing it to the castle church door. This painting, the picture does a good job of saying the other things that are there because this is where everybody's going. You can go there today, and you can see the church door that is there. That again, Martin Luther nailed to in his time period. And again, this is a momentous occasion, and people are going and reading it and looking at. The important thing, though, is that someone takes it down and writes them down. So here are all the 95 or some of the theses, and it's hard to be able to see. It's not the best quality picture here, but that's what he wants. So, importantly, and you're going to need to know these hints, winks, and nudges on the quiz. This is going to be one of your essay questions on the final exam in May, if you so choose. If we take those 95 theses and we distill it down, we can distill those down to three main ideas in Luther's full reform of the church. So Luther's teachings are going to rest on three main ideas. The first one being, and look how important this is, it's in full caps, this is a big deal, the idea of justification by faith alone, in that people can win salvation only by having faith in God's gift of forgiveness. That's all you need to do. All you need to do is believe that God is your Lord and Savior, that Jesus died for your sins, and you are golden. You believe that fully in your heart, you're getting into heaven. All you need is faith to be able to justify your getting into heaven from there. Catholic Church is teaching that you need faith and good works are needed. Acts of penance, acts of pilgrimage, acts of um, other things of that nature. And that and is the key sticking point that Luther and we saw people like Erasmus kind of have issues with. Because what if you don't have time with it because you're taking care of your sacrament, all that different stuff there. Second major idea is that all church teaching should be based on the Bible. How big of a deal is this? Again, all in caps. The Bible is the final authority for the church in Martin Luther's eyes. If it's not in the Bible, then it should not be followed, be worshiped, be used in a church service. So if all church teaching should be based on the Bible, that means the Pope, there's no Pope in the entire Bible. You can go and check it on Bible.com and report back to me. And any church traditions that aren't in the Bible are false authorities. No purgatory mentioned in the Bible, so that concept of purgatory in Martin Luther's eyes should not be a part of the church's teachings or theology. Finally, the last thing is that all people with faith are equal. So what does this mean? He's not saying equality amongst all creeds, colors, and genders. He's saying that if you are faith, you are equal with that faith, meaning that there's no need for priests to interpret the Bible for you. If all church teaching should be based on the Bible, then you need to be able to interpret that Bible for yourself. You don't need a priest standing up there speaking Latin to do that. You can do that for yourself to have, again, that personal relationship with Jesus, with God. And so this is a big deal because this idea of all people with faith are equal is a major idea that women are going to run with, and Martin Luther okays, in that if a woman reads the Bible, comes to her own conclusions from that, those conclusions are equally as valid if she can support them from the Bible as a man doing the other things. So that's the big thing. You don't need priests to interpret the Bible for you. You can go and do that yourself. So again, pause. Big deal here. We should know these three teachings. This is important, right? So hopefully you're making room on your study guide for that. But these are the three teachings that Martin Luther has, that his entire church, that his entire push for change in the church are based upon. So what's the response to Luther's ideas? It takes a couple of years, but obviously the Pope, in this case Pope Leo X, can't go and allow this to happen. This is challenging his authority. And he goes and he excommunicates Martin Luther. Martin Luther kicked out of the church. Let's follow the line of logic here. Does Martin Luther care about this? If you're thinking about it, if all church authority should be based on the Bible, if there's no pope in the Bible, the pope has no authority, so can the pope punish Martin Luther? According to Luther, the answer is no. So Luther takes this is just a piece of paper by some guy in Rome, burns the decree in a bonfire, doesn't have to go and listen to this. Now remember, there is no Germany in this point. So the political leader of this area is the Holy Roman Emperor. In this case is Charles V. The Holy Roman Emperor Charles V is a devout Catholic. He's more Catholic than any of you are going to hope to be. He goes and he tells his guys, hunt down Martin Luther, put him on trial. I don't want anybody like this in my kingdom. Right? And this is the Diet of Worms, where Luther is told to recant his ideas, and Luther goes and refuses. He says, I will not do this. I believe this. This is the correct thing. The church is wrong. I, Martin Luther, am right. So the Diet of Worms is held to put Luther on trial, and what's declared at that trial is the Edict of Worms, where Luther is declared a heretic and an outlaw, and no one in the empire is allowed to give him food or shelter. So we're kicking Luther out of the empire. We're not effectively killing him, but again, he should go and die very quickly because no one should be helping him. He's been, again, uh, ostracized from the community. Now, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V is also ruling Spain. So he's going back and forth. He's doing all this other stuff. We'll get to him in his larger global sense in our next unit on the Age of Exploration. So there are people in the Holy Roman Empire who aren't getting along real well with Charles V. Prince of Saxony is one of them. He disobeys and says Luther can go and stay with him. Now, Luther is pretty much being hunted down. So if he's not careful, he's going to be killed on the street. So Luther, he's not put under house arrest, but he's very much said, hey, you probably should stay inside this castle and let things blow over. So Luther's got a lot of free time on his hands. So remember, if all church teaching should be based on the Bible, you need to be able to read that Bible. So Luther is going to translate specifically the New Testament of the Bible from Latin into German for the first time. And so remember, with the printing press, now we can go print out those German copies and give all those out. So Luther, over time, is going to be allowed to leave the Prince of Saxony's holdings. He's going to return to Wittenberg in 1522, and what he's going to find is that his ideas have put into practice by getting rid of the Catholic Church in Wittenberg and create a new church. So instead of reforming the church like Martin Luther set out to do, people in Wittenberg specifically have started a new church based on Luther's ideas called the Lutheran Church. This is out of Germany, so hints and winks and nudges on that, and that's a church that is still around today. So again, people start to print out and come up with ideas that are attacking the Catholic Church. So here, Papa being for the Pope, we have all this stuff here written in Rome. What are these guys doing to the Pope? They're farting at the Pope because they're angry at the Pope's farting so hard and so furiously in anger that they're causing the Pope's book to explode here. Again, criticizing of the Catholic Church, showing here that they're just animals. They're doing things wrong, and Luther and his ideas are the correct way of doing it. So obviously the Pope doesn't like this. The Pope goes and excommunicates Martin Luther, but famously, Martin Luther, according to his teachings, Pope has no power here. So he takes this decree of excommunication and he goes and burns it in a bonfire. You have no power over me here, Pope. So this is going to upset people in the Holy Roman Empire, specifically our buddy Charles V here. More Catholic than any of you guys are going to hope to be. So he goes and puts Luther on trial. So here's my joke picture that I found, the Diet of Worms. It's not a diet of worms, it's a trial. And again, this is where the music swells again in the story. And Martin Luther, you have to go and recant against that. And Martin Luther says, no, I'm correct and I'm going to do that. So Edict of Worms goes and makes Luther an outlaw. He goes and hangs out with the Prince of Saxony. He's got time to kill. So this is a copy of his translation of the New Testament. You can see right here, it's signed Martin Luther, right? So there's the name that's right on there for him to go and do this. People begin to respond to Luther's ideas in other ways. In 1524, a peasant revolt breaks out. Now, the peasants might not be getting the whole ins and outs of this change for reform in theology from what Luther is saying, but they are excited about this talk of reform. And hey, we can end serfdom, and we can do this, we can do that. And so they begin to rampage through the countryside, cutting off heads, saying that we're going to follow Luther, and Luther is going to lead us to a new age of social, political, economic freedom. Luther's not talking about this. He's not happy. Lets other princes in Germany know that he does not support them, and the princes should follow law and order, put them down. Upwards of 100,000 people are killed putting down these revolts. Now, remember, this is not specifically a religious revolt. There's religious aspects to this, but again, this is tied into bigger changes that are happening in there. Luther is just kind of caught up in this social tide. He picks the side against the peasants. So some of these peasants are going to feel betrayed by this lack of leadership from Luther, and they're going to leave kind of Luther and his reforms and go back into the Catholic Church. So this is where we start to see people pick sides, not only on the lowest level of the social pyramid, but also towards the higher spots. As various princes begin to pick sides throughout quote unquote Germany, right, they begin to pick whether they want to be for the Catholic Church or against it. And this being coming out of the Middle Ages, whatever that prince's religion is, you then have to become that religion. Some people don't want to be the prince's religion. Some people want to go and change. So the princes that start to band together, who are against the Catholic Church, who begin protesting against these combined Catholic princes, are called Protestants. So Protestant, people who are protesting against the Catholics. Over time, this label of Protestant begins to be applied to Christians of non-Catholic churches who are also not a part of the Eastern Orthodox Church that's already split from Catholicism. So we see the major split in the Roman Church from the Holy Catholic Church to the Holy Lutheran Church. And now we're going to start to see, particularly in the third video and PowerPoint on this, more and more of the church fracture and that Protestant movement go in different directions. So those are the peasants going and parading and chopping off and trying to push for reform. They're upset that Luther doesn't follow them. Luther, who is right here, is going to go with the Protestant princes, and they're going to band together to go and be a opposition to the Catholic churches and the Catholic princes that have taken over. And you can kind of see what's going on with the different stuff happening here. So to finish up, Charles V himself is determined to have his subjects remain Catholic. So he's going to go to war against the Protestant princes. And if we're following along the timeline, and again, we don't need to specifically know the dates, but we should be able to keep things in order here. Luther nails his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg in 1517. In 1547, Charles V has now decisively defeated the Protestant princes and their combined forces in battle. This is 30 years after Luther has done it. This is 30 years of fighting, of physical, of philosophical fighting in Germany. Charles V has defeated the Protestant princes in battle, but the Protestant princes are saying, we still don't care. We still will not go in the back into the church. So if you're Charles V, your kingdom here in the Holy Roman Empire has gone through 30 years of conflict. Some of it actual physical fighting, particularly towards the end here, which has hurt your ideas of spreading your empire around the world. Remember, he's going into South America, Latin America, the Caribbean, into the Philippines, eastward. All that's happening. He's got bigger fish to fry than this religious debate that's happening in his backyard. So he just wants this to be at an end. So 8 years later, in 1555, Charles V calls all the German princes in quote-unquote Germany, the Holy Roman Empire, to Augsburg. All of them, Catholic and Protestant alike, can agree that they are tired of fighting. So they sit down and they peacefully hammer out an agreement to stop this fighting. And the agreement they come up with is the Peace of Augsburg. The Peace of Augsburg, what it is a settlement where each of the German princes will decide the religion of his state. So if Mr. Cranmer in Saxony wants to be Lutheran, then everybody in Saxony is Lutheran. You don't like it, you can go next word. But if Mr. Cranmer, if my brother who is a prince in Schleswig, right, wants to be Catholic, then all the people in Schleswig can be Catholic. And so all the different princes can go and kind of decide for themselves. Now, the Peace of Augsburg itself is kind of a big deal, but much more importantly is the effect of the Peace of Augsburg. So I would know, hints, winks, and nudges, the effect of the Peace of Augsburg. And the effect of the Peace of Augsburg is that Germany is going to remain weak and fragmented until the late 1800s. By letting all these princes go and choose what they want, that's going to keep quote unquote Germany from uniting and coming together. They're not going to unite and come together till the late 1800s. Spain's going to be doing it in the 1600s, England in the 1600s, France in the 1600s. All these big, huge, giant global empires are going to be coming together in the 1600s. Germany won't. It won't do it until 1871 in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, which means that Germany is going to be late to the game in trying to create a global empire like a Spain, like a Netherlands, like an England, like a France, and they're not going to be happy about it. And that's going to be one of the things that's going to set the stage for major 20th century conflicts like World War I and World War II. And all of that in, again, thinly, all of these stretch from this idea that each of the Catholic princes in the 1550s is going to choose the religion individually of each state. So what quote unquote Germany has become is this patchwork, and even this really doesn't do it justice. All these different colors is its own kingdom with its own electorate, and everybody here can kind of go and choose what different religion they want to be. So it's going to be hard to create a sort of unity out of this, and we won't see a unity in this area until the 1870s under an Otto von Bismarck. But that's a story for another day. So that's what Martin Luther has done here in Central Europe. We're going to continue in our next lecture how this Reformation is going to spread from Europe to England and how England is affected by the Protestant Reformation.